Okay. It just, that list would be a long list this election season. All right, thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order by having our new staff, Office Worker 1 Ramirez, lead us in the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Juan. First item on the agenda would be consideration of the minutes. Let's start with the May 14th meeting. Those have been circulated. Are there any questions regarding the minutes for that date? Any corrections for the minutes on that date? Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve.
And I would second that motion regarding the minutes for May 14th, 2020. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next matter for consideration would be the minutes for the June 2nd Election Day meeting. Any questions, changes in those minutes? I would move to approve those minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The routine or the most important issue on the agenda today would be our review of absentee and provisional ballots. Julie, what do you have to report to us on that?
We have 14 provisional ballots, in which 4 of them we'd like to accept. 4 of them we'd like to accept. The others decline. So
Tell me why we would be recommending that we approve or accept the 4.
3 of them are actually certificates of errors. So we found that people were not on our polls, and it was due to different problems, that they should have been on the polls.
Different problems within the e-poll book, different problems within our office, getting the paper out. Tell us what it was.
So one of them was the voter registration application was inadvertently not processed.
Okay.
And so a certificate of error was produced for that. We don't know why. It was something that was done online, and we found the online, but why it wasn't processed, I cannot answer that.
So this voter applied on time
on
to
February.
receive an absentee, and
Yes.
and it was never sent.
That's,
Okay.
so they came in person to vote, not an absentee.
Oh, okay,
They came
okay.
in person, but they weren't on the rolls. But they had applied for registration, voter registration, in February, which is within the time frame, so they should have been on the polls.
All right.
We don't know what happened with that. It was an online issue. The second one, this person had mistakenly put, instead of their previous address, they had put their their old previous address as their mailing address. And what happens in the system when mail is returned to us, and if it's returned twice right after applying, the system will automatically cancel them because the mail is not going through and it comes back and it's undeliverable. But it was a mistake on their part because they put their previous address in the mailing address. So that they should have been on the polls. They had also been registered on time. The other one was staff back in 2017 declined this voter, rejected them as underage, but according to the law, they had to have been of age by the general election, which they would have been in 2017. So again, this voter should have been on the voter polls, and this was an error in the office back in 2017.
Were they notified of that error in 2017, or
No,
excuse me, of that fact?
So yes, actually, yes.
So they applied and they weren't eligible, and they were notified, and
They would have
they just
gotten,
went ahead and voted this time absentee, is that correct?
well, provisional.
Provision. Okay, thank you. All right. And how about the other one, number 4?
Number 4. Okay, so this voter applied for the traveling board, and the application was received on 5/27. The voter was then hospitalized. So it was making it, the contact was very difficult. They did leave a voicemail on Election Day morning. We weren't able to get the traveling board to her until 6/3 the next day. And so we're recommending that this is accepted. She was hospitalized, I believe, dialysis as well.
Kent, regarding those votes or board, regarding votes 1, 2, and 4, would there be any real doubt that we can count those?
I don't think so.
All right. So I would move to approve and accept as votes items identified as 1, 2, and 4.
Second.
Any
Okay.
discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Those are counted. Now, this number 3 is a little bit different in my mind. We had somebody that apparently, and tell me if I'm wrong, but somebody that sought to register to vote. They were told that they were applying too early, and then they never pursued any further action. Is that the status? Is that what happened?
That is true. He would have automatically, the system, if somebody's rejected, the system produces a little card that is mailed out and lets them know. I will say my feeling is it is still an error on our office's part.
I mean, what more could we have done?
Well, they shouldn't have been rejected.
Well-
They were, according to law, they were of age.
They were 17?
In 2017, they would have been 18 by the general election.
All right.
And yeah, they got a card notifying they were rejected, but it was an error on our office.
All right. That's a little different. I didn't understand that they were going to be 18 by the general. I would move to approve what has been identified as ballot number 3.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Those 4 are approved. Thank you. And then
and
we
I
had
do
2, or excuse me, then we had 10 that for some reason were not approved.
Yeah, but you know
for
what? I do
recommendation.
have one more approval that I'd asked for approval.
Okay, tell us about that one.
So this gentleman, he had indicated that he had applied for a mail absentee, but it was not received. He came in on early voting on 5/26, and this is before we wanted to give time for him to see if we were going to receive his ballot in the mail. The mail ballot never did come back. So he come up to our office, and I said, just let him do a provisional. We'll wait for the mail ballot to see if it comes or not. It never did come, so we would like to take his provisional as well.
And he submitted that provisional when?
That would have,
Before or after the election day, noon?
oh, no, it was, why isn't this dated?
So as I understand, there was a ballot application, absentee ballot application that had been made. His ballot was somewhere in the float. No one really knew, and he showed up to ask about it. To be sure, we went ahead and had him complete a provisional. Is that correct?
Yes, and I believe it was the Friday, it was 26, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 26, 7, 8, it's the 29th of May.
Okay, so it would have been before 6 p.m. on election day.
Oh, yes.
I would move
Yes.
to approve that ballot.
Second.
Any discussion regarding that? All in favor? Aye. What else do we have?
The rest of these were recommending to decline. This one is, this gentleman came in to vote, but he did not have he
What's
wouldn't.
his Texas driver's license that I see?
Yes. So that was probably the issue. He did not have identification to show, so he filled out a provisional.
Put that on the other stack.
Then he has 10 days to come back to us and bring. Well, he did bring ID, but the problem is his passport expired in 2019, and his other is a Texas driver's license.
So he doesn't have a valid ID is the problem.
He doesn't have a valid government-issued ID, and we can't do the Texas.
Leave that on that stack, please. What's the other ones?
This one applied at the BMV on 7/23 of 2008 with a date of birth of February 1st of 2001. So he was not of age at the time he applied to be able to apply, so he wouldn't have turned 18 by the general election. He did receive these situations, they receive a notice telling them it's rejected because of underage, and he failed to reapply when he did become of age. So that was in 2018, he was rejected but never came back and reapplied.
Any questions on that one? Put that on that stack, please.
The next one's the same issue, but this was in 2019.
Same stack, please.
This one, voter appeared and demanded to vote after returning mail ballot. Voter was advised her mail-in ballot was received that morning. We told her we received the ballot. They insisted on voting again, so the staff went ahead and let her, but I recommend that's a reject. We did receive her mail-in ballot.
All right, so she's already voted once, and now we have another one, right?
Yes, this would be the second one.
I don't think we give any twofers on that. Leave it on that stack, please.
The next one, voter was not registered in our county, but in Monroe County.
That stack. Thank you.
Next one, same thing, also registered in Monroe County.
Same stack, please.
This voter had requested an absentee by mail. Voter presented in person and desired a different ballot style than requested in the absentee.
As in ballot style, what do you mean?
Either Democrat, Republican, or question only.
So they didn't like what they received and they wanted to change their
They
mind?
wanted to change it, yes.
All right, that stack, please.
Voter requested an absentee by mail, and again, they wanted a different ballot style.
That stack, please.
This voter returned an absentee ballot which was received in the noon mail pickup, so we got it on time, their mailed-in ballot. When the election workers called from the field, the staff could not see it was received at the time. We hadn't keyed it in yet, so we were waiting. This provisional, they did their mail-in did come in, but we had to wait until we got that keyed in to check.
All
So
right,
this would be a duplicate.
All right, so that's an
Vote.
additional duplicate. Would there be any questions regarding this one stack here, the most recent votes that we've discussed? All right. Any questions or concerns that we should potentially further consider those? I would move that we reject the ballots that are on this stack to the right here.
Second.
Any discussion regarding that? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, those are rejected. What else do we have on the agenda?
Well, we need to certify the election, but here, now we have these votes that we need to add them to our list. So we can't certify this until we do this, which will change our numbers. And that will be the use, because we will enter those into our tabulation to produce all new documents.
Who gets the pleasure of doing that?
There's one in Germany.
Well, they will watch. They don't know how to do that yet, but they'll be there.
All right, so do we take a brief recess then while that gets done? That's what I would think.
Or we can manually write it out. It's up to you.
Well, I prefer to manually write it out. because
Whatever's
otherwise-
fastest.
You can manually write it and produce the documents later, and then we can have you sign the documents later today that are
Do
done.
we have any races that 5 votes are going to affect?
None of them were Fairfield. Fairfield was one that could, but none of these are Fairfield, so.
All right, so this is not going to change the results.
No, it is not.
It will change the numbers.
That's
Is it
correct.
possible, just potentially we could come and sign later on this afternoon?
Yes,
Okay, that would be my suggestion.
yes.
All right. Okay, so we know to count those. What else do we have?
So you do have, so what I've given you are, and these are all unofficial numbers. You know, I just wanted to let you know that they're what's, the only thing that's going to change are these 5 on these.
Here's the
So
question, do the books balance?
the books balance. I've gone through them and made sure that all votes were counted in here. So we had a total, let's see, we had a total of 22,383 voters. Of that, on Election Day, 10,565 is who appeared on Election Day.
So close to half. Close to, almost.
Early voting, by the way, was 2,584.
How many?
2,584. Mail-in was over 9,200 ballots were scanned, were approved. And that's about 18 times more than what it was in 2016.
All right, all right.
I do want to make a comment about this staff did a wonderful job. These guys stayed late. They stayed through protests, even when we were asked to leave. All 3, Juan, Germany, and Mike in the back. I cannot be more pleased. They put in hours. They did not argue. I knew they were tired. They were hungry. Just the hours that we all put in. And this even leads to the expenses. We've only done a preliminary on the expenses.
I was curious about that. That's later on. Maybe that's the next item we ought to get into.
Yeah, it's just that the amount of people that the expenses of people were almost nearly the same as in 2016. It's just that what switched was how much personnel worked dealing with the mail-in ballots versus on working the polls, that kind of thing. But we had about 119 people that we brought in. But on top of that, which is not calculated, is there were a couple days where I had almost the entire clerk's office working.
I noticed that one day, Monday morning in the hallway, the day before election. I don't know if any of the other board members were up there, but I mean, you had them stacked in the hallway. I take it that was because the courthouse was closed?
Yes.
I understand, we had our 2 new office workers, one in Germany, and I know Mike also did a lot of work on that. But I think particularly just out of the box that we were very fortunate with these
yes.
these 3 gentlemen. So.
And I'm telling you, they jumped in and worked. They did wonderful. I feel very blessed.
It was a sink or swim, and certainly you didn't sink. You were swimming.
Juan really got it. 2 weeks in before the election comes in, and yeah, we should introduce.
And Juan Ramirez, please stand up and be recognized by the. I don't think we've ever introduced you, but certainly, and you in Germany, Michael, thank you. Incredible hours, and certainly you made it through this one. You can make it through any of them.
Never say never.
Julie,
Never,
do we
that's a
have,
good point.
particularly with the workers that are older than Joe and I, did we have any trouble with those people showing up?
Well, so in the beginning, they left, either doctors told them that they shouldn't be working. We could not work 6 feet apart from each other. I can tell you, it was risky. So there were people that even came to scan or to help open envelopes, and they were like, this is too risky for me. And so they did leave, and I totally understood that, and I told them that. But that's the condition. That's what we had to work with. But we got it done. And us getting out the numbers the next day after election, we knew that was going to happen because mail-in ballots were turned in at vote centers, and they didn't come back here until after 6 p.m. on election night. And of course, there's a process to match those. You take those ballots, you got to match it to the application. You need to make sure that the signatures match, and then they need to be opened, and then they need to be scanned. So we got everything done by the afternoon of the next day, and I think that was excellent.
All right, thank you. Let's go. Do you have anything more to add regarding election expenses? I know you're
Well,
running the totals, but.
I can give you, you know, so personnel cost, you know, about $42,000. That's the extra personnel. That doesn't include people that are already working here.
By the way, do you have the budget numbers? What was budgeted and what?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
All right.
I
Just
don't.
curious.
I know that, you know, GBS, $58,000 is going to be is about their bill.
But that's always about their bill, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's very expensive to do the test cards, to do the ballots themselves. And I was very shocked to find out how much it costs to do the voice over for ADA purposes. So we go through it and make sure that that they say the voice perfectly, so somebody who doesn't see well, they can listen. And that's very expensive. It's
That's
per precinct.
federal mandate,
Yep.
and we're obliged to do that, and so we pay whatever the rate is, I suspect, so. Anything else? All right, unfinished new business?
Well,
Do we have anything?
if you wanted to touch on
How
it.
brave are we? Do we want to deal with new equipment or anything like that?
Oh, well,
I mean, whatever happened to
okay, so-
the night that we had all the machines here and had the people here and people came in and tested all that? Where did all that go?
COVID hit, and so all those talks had stopped. I will say that we are meeting with the Secretary of State, phone conference next week to discuss, so I have no clue where that discussion's going to lead, but I am going to say this. We were willing to change equipment, at least I'm going to say this is my opinion, for November election, if we did it in May. It is now June, and we don't know where we're at. I think that whole scenario has changed. And I think we would be taking a risk, sort of like what Georgia did. If we got new and we're not trained and it fails, I just don't want to see that in a presidential November election.
Now,
And that's my opinion.
and wouldn't the real issue be, or the real concern be, here we have the state that's going to potentially give us maybe, let's say, $2 million for election equipment. And so wouldn't that be something like a bird in a hand, if you will, as compared to how's this equipment going to work in November? Isn't that the decision that we'll be faced with?
And if this,
If the money develops.
right, and we'll need to talk about that, because I would hate to pass over the money. But let's wait till after next week to find out what they're going to offer and what they're looking at.
I you know, have read about Georgia, and at least what I've read so far, part of the problem was new equipment that people were not trained on, and particularly in certain large counties, that was led to all of those long lines. So I think that's a real concern. We also had, with this past election, the state board allowed basically no reason absentee balloting requests for it, and that hasn't been passed for the new one. So I don't see that. I think we're going to have to, you know, I'm worried that I think Indiana and our leadership in Indiana and in Tippecanoe County, particularly since we have Purdue over there, and they got on top of this. You know, I'm not worried when I go out here. People wear their mask, and we've done really good. But there's all this going on, and so I think we're going to have a large potential for absentee balloting next time, as long as we can have the no excuse absentee balloting. I think we'll have a lot more people vote. I mean, there's a lot of passion out there right now, and on that. So to my mind, it's really hard to make major decisions on changing how we do it when everything is in so much flux.
And that is true. And we need to keep in mind, if we did get new election equipment, that also means new e-poll books.
That was around 300,000, wasn't it?
Yes, and that's even more to learn, to relearn. Yes.
All right. So even if the state gives us election equipment, machines, if you will, we still have significant expense on the side that the county council would be involved in. Is
That
that
is- yeah.
sort of what we're
Yes.
thinking? All right, all right. Well, somewhere along the line, we'll have to balance, money in hand versus money and problems down the road. Any other unfinished business, the board? What do we have?
Did you want to?
Raise that issue
revisit?
if you would, Julie, thank you.
So we had brought this up in the last meeting, but this request came in on June 2nd after, well, it was almost 1 PM in an email, wanting to be able to vote by mail. But it was on June 2nd at 12:54. And this person did have several conversations, or a couple conversations with Germany over here on the phone beforehand, where just a short synopsis is they had.
Forgive me,
Yes.
let me interrupt, excuse me for that. But the bottom line is, we had a request for an absentee ballot that came in after the date.
Her original, she sent to the wrong email.
All right, so we didn't get it. It's not, I mean, and we're not involved in who she sends it to. And so the request came after the deadline to request an absentee ballot.
Yes. Yes.
Is there any need to further consider that?
And
I mean,
her
we can
phone
take on a
call-
lot, but we can't take on that.
That's right. That's correct.
All
That's
right,
correct.
thank you for reporting that. Any other business? Comments? Comments? Ken, if you would, be recognized, state your name for the record, please.
This is the one.
I don't.
Ken Jones with the League of Women Voters. So I think what you just addressed was probably something I got an email about. I don't know if we want to, let me give you, I'll give you the email that I sent you guys over the weekend. I don't know if it's the same voter you're talking about.
Is this dealing with the absentee ballot that was requested after the deadline?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep,
okay.
yep. So they've gotten that.
Okay, great.
All right, all
The
right.
last
That-
one.
And so we've addressed that.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So my question, because I sent you the email over the weekend, she was reaching out somewhat.
May
distraught.
31st.
I'm sorry?
May 31st, right?
See, this weekend before, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so just for point of clarification, I think on the 30th, and you had a resolution that said you as a board, could decide to accept an absentee voter application late, after the May 21 date.
I
thought
don't
you
believe that was a resolution.
Well, but you passed something, I thought, on the 30th that said
Well,
that.
as I recall, and I'd want to look, but I don't believe we ever agreed to modify the state law regarding the deadline for that. The exception was, and we indicated there could be some wiggle room here or there, because routinely people are involved in the process, and occasionally, let's face it, if somebody calls us and we're supposed to send something out, and we, for instance, they call and we're supposed to send it out and we don't, and that's on us.
Correct.
But on this circumstance, that's on them. They applied late.
Right. They applied late, and I don't know all the
That's not the
circumstances.
wiggle
I'm not
room.
here to argue her case. It's more to understand what power did you give yourselves on the 30th? And you don't have the authority to undo this situation.
We don't have the authority to undo the statute. And let's face it, if there's gray area and something's in the weeds a little bit, we take, and you may have noticed earlier, we'll take a harder look at that.
Sure.
I mean, let's face it, you've been to various meetings in the past, and if something's on us, we take ownership of it, and that person votes. But that's not on us. That's on the voter.
If I can add, though, because of the meeting you're talking about, it's because of COVID. So I think we had also discussed that if somebody literally became ill and could not get that to us, that was more of the type of reason that we were considering that we would make some sort of alteration to let them.
Right.
Well, for instance, our travel board here.
Yeah, yes, yes.
Okay, the travel board didn't get to them till 6:30, and that election day. And so that's the kind of thing that, I don't know why they didn't get there, but they requested timely, and the board didn't get there, so in theory, they didn't vote before closing. But that's the type of thing that we'll own.
Okay. It's a point of clarification on
Thank
that
you.
specific instance.
What else do you have?
Another point of clarification. So I understand that absentee votes, ballots were being taken at the polling locations and they were time-stamped as they were received, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I hope so. They were supposed to be,
At the,
Or they wrote down the time when it was received.
that's right.
yes.
So I assume if I showed up at 1:30 PM at St. Thomas Aquinas to hand in my absentee ballot, that was noted and it was counted or not counted?
My instincts are, I would believe it wouldn't have been counted because it was tardy.
Okay,
But what, yes, it was tardy.
could the voter have been notified of that and told, cancel this because you're not going to be, was the voter notified that their vote would not be counted?
I don't know.
We-
And could
I mean,
they
we have a
have
policy
then
of telling
turned around
people
and
that.
said, then never mind, I'll vote in person right now?
But the law does not allow you to do that, but if there was a spoiled, if it was damaged, so what some people might have done, there was a note at every polling place that let voters know that if they could fill out a
ABS 5?
ABS 5 and mark that it was spoiled, and they could have torn it up, whatever.
And did we let them vote after
That
that?
many, we had many. In fact, I've counted 103, I think, people had done, literally, they surrendered their ballot and voted in person.
Right.
And so we were allowing, if they surrendered their ballot, turned it in, we were allowing them
So-
to vote that afternoon.
Okay. I think what might be and anticipating, again, next cycle, let's assume we get the same level of absentee going on.
But we still have to keep in the law. So the law states that if they have an absentee ballot and it's not spoiled and it's not damaged,
Right.
I don't think it's right for us to say, go ahead and rip it. There's a loophole, because
Right.
if it is destroyed, or
Right.
if you say that you've never received it, because that
Right.
was that was the big one. If you
Okay.
didn't receive it, you could vote in person. And I think that's where
No, you're
what we
going the
need to
right direction.
discuss.
The problem is what people's perceptions were and how were those perceptions created. And that's something that in the fall will again be addressed. I don't know if we need to take out TV ads or what we need to do to get people on board. But whatever we need to do, I mean, we'll certainly endeavor to do it. I would just love to get people that do turn in their absentees just to fill in the little blank that they're supposed to and follow the instructions.
Right.
I mean, we spent 3 hours just messing around with those. So,
But
I
I think
can-
if voters were aware that at 1:30, that paper ballot didn't matter anymore, that would have changed. They would have questioned. They would have said, wait, what alternatives are
exactly.
there?
The point is how do you
Is there a
educate
form to
people?
fill out? Are you telling me if I rip it up in front of your eyes, I get to vote?
Well,
And
but
if I
see-
don't, it doesn't count?
Or if you lost it or it was.
Or it's like, oh, it's in my car, suddenly this is my
they're
electric
they're
bill.
taking an oath. But I can tell you, there was 48 of them, Ken. There was 48 ballots that were turned in after that time.
Across all polling locations?
All of them, uh-huh.
Okay, that's helpful to know, too.
Yes.
Most of them that, let's face it, there's a lot of problems with absentees, and we won't go into all that here. You're well aware of it, and you're an advocate, and so you understand those. But the problem is that many people had not voted absentee before.
Vast majority.
And so, I mean, let's face it, 10,000 or however, 9,200 plus? And so I suspect that at least 9,000 or 8,000 of those people had never voted absentee, so it's just a learning curve for them.
We had, some of the other problems we had were people did not sign their ballot. And when if we had their number on file, and a lot of people didn't put their number on file. It's on the application, but they didn't. But we would call them and give them the opportunity to come back and sign. But that was one of the there's a lot of errors with mail-in ballot. Same thing with applications. A lot of people use their computer to sign the application, but that application signature needs to match their real signature, because it is then in turn matched to their ballot when it comes back. That's how we determine whether or not it's a good, that we can go ahead and count it.
That's
accept
another
it.
good example